The storm arrived without mercy. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, covering the small town in heavy shadows. Strong wind shook trees, and rain poured down like a waterfall. Thunder echoed again and again, making the ground tremble. Soon, the electricity failed, and the entire area fell into darkness. In an old house at the edge of the street lived an elderly couple named Ben and Mara. They had lived there for many years and knew every sound the house made. That evening, they were calm despite the storm. Ben was lighting a candle while Mara checked the windows to make sure they were closed properly. They believed the storm would pass like many others before. Earlier that day, two neighborhood kids, Leo and Nina, had come to the house to help Ben carry some boxes to the basement. Ben trusted them and often let them visit because they were usually polite and curious. The kids were supposed to leave before dark, but the storm arrived faster than expected. Rain blocked the roads, and Ben asked them to stay inside until it became safer. As the wind grew louder, fear slowly entered the kids' hearts. They had never experienced such a strong storm before. When the power suddenly went out, Nina screamed, and Leo felt his heart race. The house felt strange in the darkness. Every sound seemed bigger, and every shadow felt alive. Ben tried to calm them, telling them that storms were loud but not dangerous if everyone stayed inside. Mara smiled and offered them warm tea, but before they could drink it, a loud crash of thunder shook the house. The kids jumped up in panic. Water began leaking from outside, sliding down the basement steps. Leo remembered hearing that basements were safer during storms. Without thinking clearly, he shouted that everyone should go downstairs. In the chaos, Ben and Mara moved toward the basement door to check the water. The kids ran ahead, their fear controlling their actions. The basement was dark and cold. The sound of rain hitting the walls echoed loudly. Suddenly, another strong gust of wind slammed the basement door shut. The heavy door locked automatically. Ben and Mara were on the wrong side of the door. The kids stood frozen upstairs. The storm was too loud to hear anything clearly. They thought Ben and Mara were behind them. Scared and shaking, they ran into the living room and hid under a table, holding each other tightly. Down in the basement, Ben tried the door. It would not open. Mara looked around and noticed water slowly spreading across the floor. Old boxes began to soak. The smell of damp air filled the space. Ben stayed calm, though worry filled his eyes. He told Mara not to panic. They had faced many problems in life, and they would face this one together. Mara nodded, but her hands trembled as she held onto Ben's arm. The water kept rising slowly. Outside, the storm showed no sign of stopping. The basement felt colder with every passing minute. The candlelight from upstairs could not reach them. Darkness surrounded them, broken only by the distant sound of rain and thunder. Ben tried calling out, but his voice was lost in the noise of the storm. Mara listened carefully, hoping to hear the kids. All she heard was water dripping and the house creaking under pressure. Upstairs, Leo felt something was wrong. He noticed water starting to pool near the basement door. Fear twisted inside him, but he was too scared to move. Nina whispered that something did not feel right. They argued quietly, unsure of what to do. Minutes passed like hours. The storm continued its attack on the house. The blackout made everything feel endless. The kids finally gathered courage and approached the basement door. Leo placed his hand on the handle and tried to open it. It would not move. A cold feeling ran through Nina. She realized that Ben and Mara were not upstairs. Panic replaced fear. She began to cry, calling their names, but the storm swallowed her voice. Below them, Ben and Mara felt the water reach their ankles. Ben knew they needed help soon. He remembered an old flashlight kept on a shelf from years ago. Slowly, he searched in the dark, feeling along the wall until his fingers touched something solid. He turned the flashlight on. A small beam of light cut through the darkness. It was weak, but it was enough. Mara felt a little relief. Light meant hope. Ben shined the light around and noticed a small window near the ceiling. It was blocked by debris outside, but it showed that water from the storm was flooding the area. Time was not on their side. They began calling out again, louder this time. Their voices carried upward, steady and strong despite the danger. They refused to let fear take over. Upstairs, Nina finally heard them. Her heart dropped. She grabbed Leo's arm, her face pale. They now understood what had happened. Their fear had caused a terrible mistake. The storm continued to roar as the truth settled in. And with water rising in the basement, every second now mattered more than ever. The moment Nina heard the voices from below, her whole body froze. Her hands felt cold, and her heart beat fast. She looked at Leo, and he could see fear and guilt in her eyes. They both knew they had made a terrible mistake. Ben and Mara were trapped in the basement, and the storm was still strong outside. Leo tried the basement door again. He pulled the handle with all his strength, but it did not move. The door was old and heavy, and the lock was stuck tight. Water had started to gather near their feet upstairs, and the sound of rain felt louder than before. Nina called out Ben's name. Her voice shook, but this time she did not stop. She kept calling, hoping they could hear her. From below, Ben heard her faint voice and felt a small sense of relief. At least the kids knew now. Ben shouted back, telling them to stay calm and find help. He did not want them to panic more. Mara stood beside him, holding the flashlight. The water had risen past their ankles, and the cold made her legs feel stiff. Upstairs, the kids knew they could not open the door alone. Leo remembered that their neighbor Sam lived just 2 houses away. Sam was strong and always helped others during storms. Without wasting time, Leo grabbed Nina's hand, and they ran toward the front door. When they opened it, wind and rain rushed inside. The storm was fierce. The street was dark, and water flowed along the road like a small river. Thunder roared above them, making Nina flinch. Still, they ran, slipping on wet ground but refusing to stop. They reached Sam's house and banged on the door again and again. After a moment that felt too long, the door opened. Sam stood there holding a flashlight, surprised to see the kids soaked and shaking. They spoke fast, their words mixed with fear. They told Sam about Ben and Mara trapped in the flooding basement. Sam did not hesitate. He grabbed his raincoat, a toolbox, and followed them back into the storm. Back at the house, Sam examined the basement door. Water was now coming out from under it. He tried the handle, then used tools to break the lock. The kids stood behind him, holding the flashlight and praying silently. Downstairs, Ben noticed the water reach his knees. He helped Mara stand on a wooden step to keep her higher. His arms were tired, but his mind stayed focused. He reminded Mara to breathe slowly and stay calm. Suddenly, they heard loud metal sounds above them. The door shook slightly. Hope filled the basement. Ben raised his voice again, calling upward. Mara held the flashlight tightly, pointing it toward the door. With one final push, the lock broke. The basement door opened, and water rushed in fast. Sam quickly reached down and helped Mara first, then Ben. The kids watched with wide eyes, relief and fear mixing inside them. Ben and Mara were cold and weak, but they were alive. Sam helped them upstairs and wrapped them in dry blankets. The storm still raged, but the worst moment had passed. Nina began to cry, unable to stop. She said sorry again and again. Leo stood beside her, his head down. They expected anger, maybe shouting. Instead, Ben placed a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder. He told them mistakes happen when fear takes control, but what matters is fixing them. Mara smiled softly, though her face was tired. She thanked the kids for getting help quickly. Her kindness surprised them more than anger ever could. The rain slowly began to weaken outside. Sirens could be heard in the distance as emergency teams moved through the area. The house was damaged, and the basement was ruined, but lives were saved. That night, as everyone sat together in the dim light, the kids realized how close they came to losing something precious. The storm had tested them all, and the lesson would stay in their hearts forever. Morning arrived slowly after the long night. The storm had passed, leaving the town quiet and wet. Gray clouds still hung in the sky, but the rain had stopped. Water covered the streets, and fallen branches lay everywhere. The old house stood tired but still standing. Ben sat near the window, wrapped in a thick blanket. His body felt heavy, but his mind was clear. Mara rested on a chair beside him, holding a warm cup in her hands. They were safe, and that thought brought comfort even though the night still felt close in their memories. Leo and Nina sat across the room. They had not slept much. Their clothes were dry now, but their faces showed worry. They kept looking at Ben and Mara, unsure what to say. The silence felt long and painful. Sam moved around the house, checking damage and opening windows to let fresh air in. The basement was flooded and ruined, but the main floor was safe. Sam told Ben that many houses in the area had suffered worse damage. That made Ben thankful. Nina finally stood up. Her legs shook, but she faced Ben and Mara. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. She said she was deeply sorry and that fear had controlled her actions. Leo stood beside her and nodded. He admitted he should have thought better and stayed calm. Ben listened without interrupting. When she finished, he smiled gently. He told them fear can make even good people act without thinking. He explained that learning from mistakes was more important than feeling shame forever. Mara added that storms test people in unexpected ways. She said the kids did the right thing by asking for help instead of hiding. Her voice was soft, but her words were strong. The kids felt some weight lift from their hearts. They promised themselves they would never forget that night. Later that morning, neighbors came to check on Ben and Mara. News of the flooding had spread quickly. People brought food, dry clothes, and kind words. The house filled with quiet voices and gentle movement. Leo and Nina helped where they could. They carried wet items outside, wiped the floor, and listened carefully to every instruction. They wanted to make things right, not with words, but with actions. As the day went on, the town slowly came back to life. Power returned in some areas. Emergency teams moved through the streets, helping families and clearing roads. The sound of engines and voices replaced the silence of the storm. In the afternoon, Ben asked Leo and Nina to walk with him to the front porch. The sun finally appeared between the clouds, lighting the wet ground. The air smelled fresh, mixed with earth and rain. Ben pointed toward the street and told them how many storms he had seen in his life. He said each one taught him something new. Some taught patience, others taught courage. That storm, he said, taught the value of quick help and honest responsibility. The kids listened closely. They realized Ben was not just talking about the storm, but about life. That evening, Mara cooked a simple meal using what was left in the kitchen. Everyone sat together at the table. It was quiet, but peaceful. The house felt warm again. Leo noticed how strong Ben and Mara were, not just in body, but in heart. They had faced danger without anger and fear without hate. That impressed him deeply. Nina felt a change inside herself. She understood that being brave did not mean never being scared. It meant doing the right thing even when fear was present. As night came, Sam said goodbye and promised to return the next day to help clean the basement. The neighbors waved as they left. The town felt closer now, connected by shared hardship. Before going to sleep, Leo and Nina stood by the door. They thanked Ben and Mara for forgiving them. Ben wished them safe travels home once the roads cleared. When the lights were turned off, the house rested quietly. The storm was gone, but its lesson remained strong. And in that quiet night, everyone knew that what happened had changed them in a way they would carry forever. The next morning began with soft sunlight touching the wet streets. Birds returned to the trees, and the air felt calm after the storm. The town was still damaged, but hope slowly moved through every corner. Ben woke early and sat quietly, listening to the sounds of life returning. Mara joined him in the kitchen. She moved slowly, but her steps were steady. They shared a quiet moment, thankful for another day. The memory of rising water still lived in their minds, but fear no longer controlled their thoughts. Soon, Leo and Nina arrived with Sam. They had asked permission from their families to help clean the basement. Their faces showed determination. They did not come because they were told to. They came because they wanted to make things right. Ben welcomed them with a nod and a kind smile. He appreciated effort more than words. Sam brought tools, buckets, and gloves. Together, they walked toward the basement door. When the door opened, a strong smell of damp air came out. The basement was filled with muddy water and broken items. Old memories stored in boxes were ruined. Nina felt sad seeing the damage. She knew this happened because of that night. Mara touched her shoulder and told her not everything lost is gone forever. She said memories live in people, not in boxes. Nina felt comfort in those words. They worked slowly. Sam guided them on how to remove water safely. Leo carried heavy buckets outside, his arms aching, but he did not stop. Nina cleaned shelves and wiped mud from the walls. Ben watched them with pride growing quietly in his heart. As hours passed, the basement began to look better. Not clean, but hopeful. Light reached places that were once dark. The work was hard, but it brought everyone closer. During a break, they sat on the steps and shared water and bread. Sam told stories of past storms and how people helped each other. He said storms show who people truly are. Leo listened carefully. He realized that responsibility is not about being perfect. It is about facing mistakes and choosing to act better. Later that day, more neighbors joined to help. Some brought cleaning supplies. Others brought food. The basement turned into a place of teamwork instead of fear. Mara watched the kids work and felt something warm inside. She saw growth in them that many adults never reach. She knew this experience would shape their future choices. As the sun lowered, the work slowed. The basement was not finished, but it was safer. Ben thanked everyone. His voice was calm but full of feeling. He said help given from the heart is the strongest kind. That evening, the town gathered near the street. Emergency teams shared updates, and people checked on one another. Leo and Nina stood beside Ben and Mara. They no longer felt like strangers. They felt like part of something bigger. When night came, lights shone from many houses again. The darkness from the blackout felt far away. Laughter and soft music could be heard in the distance. Before leaving, Leo and Nina promised to return the next day. Ben told them they were always welcome. Mara hugged them gently. As they walked home, the kids looked back at the old house. It no longer felt scary. It felt strong. Inside, Ben and Mara prepared for sleep. The house still carried signs of the storm, but peace filled the rooms. They knew the hardest part was over. That night, Ben looked at Mara and said the storm brought danger, but it also brought people together. Mara agreed and smiled. Outside, the stars shone clearly. And under that calm sky, the town rested, knowing that even after great fear, kindness and courage can rebuild what was nearly lost. A week passed after the storm, and the town slowly returned to normal life. The streets were cleaner, shops reopened, and people smiled more often. The old house where Ben and Mara lived stood stronger than before, not because the damage was fully repaired, but because it was filled with care and unity. Every morning, Ben walked outside and greeted neighbors. He moved slower now, but his steps were steady. Mara spent time cleaning what could be saved and letting go of what could not. She believed holding on to peace was more important than holding on to things. Leo and Nina came every day after school. They helped with cleaning, carrying supplies, and small repairs. Sometimes they just sat and listened to Ben tell stories about his younger days. These moments taught them more than any lesson from books. One afternoon, Ben asked the kids to help him fix a broken fence in the yard. The fence had fallen during the storm and lay quietly on the grass. As they worked together, Ben explained how storms can break things, but people have the power to rebuild. Leo thought deeply about those words. He realized that fear once controlled him, but now responsibility guided his actions. Nina felt the same change in herself. She felt stronger and more aware of others. When the fence was finally fixed, Mara brought them fresh juice. They sat under a tree, enjoying the calm breeze. The sky was clear, and the sound of birds filled the air. It felt like a reward after days of hard work. That evening, the town organized a small gathering to thank everyone who helped during the storm. It was simple but full of warmth. People shared food, stories, and laughter. Children played nearby, and elders watched with quiet smiles. Ben was asked to say a few words. He stood carefully and looked around. He spoke about the night of the storm, not with fear, but with honesty. He said mistakes happen, but what matters is how people respond afterward. His words touched many hearts. Leo and Nina stood in the crowd, feeling proud and humble at the same time. They knew that moment had changed them forever. As days turned into weeks, the basement repairs slowly continued. It would take time, but Ben and Mara did not rush. They had learned patience from life itself. One afternoon, Mara gave Nina an old photo that survived the flood. It showed Ben and Mara smiling many years ago. Mara told her to keep it as a reminder of hope. Nina held it carefully, knowing its value went beyond paper. Leo began helping other neighbors too. He fixed small things and offered help without being asked. Nina started doing the same. The storm had taught them kindness through responsibility. One quiet evening, Ben and Mara sat together watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold. Ben held Mara's hand and smiled. He said life tested them, but also gave them something precious. It gave them connection. Mara agreed. She said the storm took water and fear into their home, but it also brought trust and understanding. As night fell, the house lights shone softly. The basement was no longer a place of fear. It became a reminder of strength. Leo and Nina visited one last time before returning fully to their normal routines. They hugged Ben and Mara and thanked them for teaching them patience and courage. Ben told them to always think clearly, even when afraid. When the kids walked away, Ben and Mara watched until they disappeared down the street. They felt proud, not only of surviving the storm, but of seeing growth in young hearts. The town rested peacefully that night. Rain no longer scared them. Darkness no longer felt empty. Everyone knew that even in the worst moments, kindness can light the way. And so, what began as fear in a flooding basement became a story of learning, forgiveness, and hope that would live on long after the storm was forgotten.